new event with Dr. Bruna, and this is our first time, and it's our pleasure to invite her to give a talk. Dr. Bruna, can you introduce yourself and you can start your topic? It's all yours.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sure. First of all, thanks for inviting me. So my name is Bruna, and I have a PhD in physics from University of São Paulo in Brazil. And I work as a staff scientist at the moment with quantum technologies in Canada, mostly quantum computing and quantum algorithm side. And I'm very interested as well in science communication and just ethical aspects of quantum technologies in general. Should I start?
Yes, it's all yours.
Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay, I guess you can see, right?
Yes, for me, I can see it.
Maybe just one question. You prefer a question on the talk or just on this session?
I'm not sure if I understand.
When our participant can ask you any question with your talk, or we go into this question session?
Okay. Well, it can be during my presentation, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get the notifications for the message, at least the written ones. So just let me know if someone's asking something.
Okay, so if there will be some question, just write your hand and I will try stop you and just ask, okay?
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so I'll start now. Presentation is called Quantum on the Flipside, the Global South Perspective on Quantum Hype. And I'm sure not everybody really likes the term Global South. I'm just using because I think it's useful here. And I'm going to talk mostly about, I'm going to divide, first of all, I'm going to talk about knowledge barriers, mostly how knowledge both in quantum technologies and quantum physics can be a bit difficult to reach certain countries, especially because of language barriers, but also just financial barriers that we have, and how that relates to questions of quantum sovereignty, security, and just the quantum divide in general. For the final part, I'm going to talk a bit of whether or not we're talking about the quantum divide or the quantum gap enough. And I'm going to bring a few results from a recent paper that I submitted with a few colleagues. So yeah, the big divisions that I have, sorry. Can you still see my screen, which is... Okay, I think it's fine. My screen just got black out of the sun. But yeah, I'm gonna talk first of knowledge barriers, then about quantum divide. So a little bit about me. Don't think I need to introduce too much. As I already said, I have a PhD in physics and I work with quantum technologies at the moment. But I think it's also important to mention that I'm from Brazil originally. Now I'm based in Canada for 2 years living in Canada. And I'm doing science communication since 2019. And it changed formats in many ways. I work in a group and then by myself. And then now I'm back to work in an organization, like a volunteering basis, but also as a group. And that changed. I always had a focus to talk about quantum physics and quantum technologies in my native language, which is Portuguese. So I'm bringing also a bit of the insights that I got just by experience, right? So first of all, just gonna bring a question that many people ask when I have this sort of conversations is whether quantum physics hype and quantum tech hype can be divorced, because I'm gonna talk in a significant part of this presentation about quantum physics hype. And some people understand hype, quantum hype, as the inflated expectations about what quantum technologies, or maybe only about quantum computing, what quantum computers can do. And I just want to make an argument that I don't think it's that easy to separate, and how, especially when I'm talking about this division between global north and global south, that can be even more difficult to separate. There are other interplays that we should consider. For instance, over here, there's a video, it's in Portuguese, I saw on Instagram, claiming that we live in a simulation created by a quantum computer, and that has 5,000 likes. It just claims that we live in a simulation made by a quantum computer, and then she proceeds to talk about things that don't relate at all, like the similarities between the formats of galaxies and the neurons, and something that really doesn't make any sense. But just to explain how things, the kind of distortion that we generally see in terms of quantum mysticism and like law of attraction, that's generally like quantum physics, can be also murked now and just merged with quantum computers, the idea of quantum computers, and makes things even worse, right? Those two kinds of hype can become something even more complicated. So yeah, my point here is that the lines are blurry, so I'm gonna start by that belief, right? And a few comments also on how why people generally don't care about communicating correctly about quantum technologies or physics. And a few things that I hear is that there's plenty of accessible content in English. And this is one of the points that I think is very important to make in terms of quantum divide, is that English proficiency, we hear that English is a global language, but how global it really is. And this graph hopefully can share a light in this, because you can see here in the light blue part is actually moderate. I think it's kind of misleading, because you look at this blue and you think that's like good or like high or very high, but it's actually moderate. So sort of like not everybody speaks English. Brazil is in the low category. Many countries are either low, very low, or moderate. So this is something to consider, like how much are you reaching if you really just talk in English and relying in English for science communication, science outreach, right? And also from the things that get translated, because of course some things get translated, what gets translated? And then here I'm making a reference to the aliens with quantum computers. I'm not gonna name names, but there was a very famous science communicator that went on a podcast and they talk about how if aliens exist, they probably have a quantum computer, this kind of things, right? They made a bunch of not very good claims about quantum technology. And because it's very famous, this is the kind of thing that you see translated, right? So that's very complicated. You have not enough content that is accessible, and then the content that gets translated, chances are there's gonna be the content that is not very actually accurate, right? It's just the content that got more attention. That's not necessarily the most reliable one. Here's another example. The autocomplete results for the query is quantum ... quantum physics. In English, you see all these questions like, is quantum physics real, proven, hard, deterministic? And in Portuguese, the equivalent Google search gives 7 out of 10 results being about spirituality, right? The first one, it says, is quantum physics a science? Is quantum physics proven? But then the others are quantum physics and spirituality, quantum physics and law of attraction, and God, and Bible. So you can see that the domains of what quantum physics being the kind of content that you have and the kind of questions that people have is kind of telling you how people are interacting with the topic of quantum physics, depending on the language. And here's just a few examples also of the outcome of that. What happens if you search quantum physics in Portuguese? So here's on the left side, there's TikTok, and it's talking about Dirac equation, how Dirac equation is supposedly the love equation that says that everybody, the person, when it falls in love, will be continue to be connected forever, or something like this, right? And the funny thing is also, this is not even Portuguese. I searched in Portuguese, but it gave me a result in Spanish, even though the word's not quite the same. So that's how few content you can get, depending on what you're looking for in social media. And in the other side, in the right side, you have Instagram. And also, then again, I imagine you cannot read Portuguese, but you can tell that those things are not really about quantum physics. Except the first one, I believe the first image actually talks about phenomena in quantum physics, but all the others are about law of attraction, karma, aliens, religion, those kinds of topics, right? Even though you're searching for quantum physics. And then going back to the point of translation, okay, you can just translate, but if you have something that is already not correct, as I mentioned before, it's very hard for you to disprove. And there's even another layer of difficulty, which is, okay, so if a scientist from the global north says something, then you say, well, this is not exactly correct. But people are like, okay, but he went to this podcast. He has all this fame, and then it's difficult for you to just try to correct that person if just because that thing was not correctly translated or the thing was not accurate. So relying on content that's translated or that is not from your own scientists is always harder, right? So there's also this aspect. Another justification that I hear to not work and not try to do good communication on quantum technologies, that it's not worth it, the topic's too hard. And that one's a pet peeve of mine, because it feels like you're saying that everybody is stupid and you're the only one that can understand this kind of things. And I come from a physics background, and I feel like this can be very prevalent. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a ego playing out, and people, there's also convenience of gatekeeping this kind of knowledge, because then your knowledge gets to be more valued, right? And this is silly, but you see this happening all the time, so that's very unfortunate. And of course, one of the main quotes that you associate with these ideas that nobody understands quantum mechanics, said first by Feynman, but many other people are replicating this. And of course, there is a whole context, and in a sense, I agree with the fact that, well, there's still many open questions in quantum physics. There are a lot of difficulties to talk in terms of quantum physics. But I feel like this quote and this idea is very weaponized against people that are actually trying to do the communication. And then again, going back to my own experience, more than 5 years doing this kind of science communication, quantum physics, you often will hear from like comments or just feedback from people that, wow, this topic's too difficult. You're oversimplifying, or people cannot understand if you don't put any equations, even though, like, just historically, there are many insights that came before the equations, right? So then again, my issue with this kind of reasoning is that it is just a preconceived notion that stops people from even trying to talk about quantum physics or quantum technologies, right? And that makes things very, very difficult. And the third justification to not talk about quantum physics and technology for the broader audiences that is not hurting anyone. And here's a photo of me close to where I used to live. And this is just a place, a therapy place nearby where I used to live. And there are a few things here. There's like hypnosis, feng shui, like yoga, I believe, but they also have like quantum table and quantum cure and just a lot of weird like mix of different therapies. And that's a big issue. I feel that's a big issue, and there's definitely an ethical problem with that because those things are not based in reality. And those things are taking money away from people that are trying to look for therapy, right? And then we go back to what do people have available when they do a Google search or they search on the social media, which is something that people are doing very frequently about quantum physics or quantum science in general, right? If they only find content that leads them to an idea of quantum cure or quantum mysticism, they will eventually think that this is true, or this is at least part of what quantum physics encompasses, right? So I believe there is an issue that some people turn a blind eye, then again, for the reasons that it's too difficult or not worth it, right? And then you can think, well, maybe this is an isolated problem or a global south problem. And again, I want to make sure that even though I'm talking about geopolitical differences and the difference between global north and south, that those things are big interplay with each other, right? The things in the global south do not affect only global north, but also, I don't think it's a global south issue. Even though many times when I talk about those things, they're like, oh, I didn't know quantum mysticism is still a thing. But then I want to point out, for instance, there's a book and a podcast called Conspirituality, which is very interesting. It's talking about this mix between spirituality and conspiracy theory and how those things feed each other. And sometimes it's a pipeline from each other for each other, because you start with spirituality and then you go into conspiracy theory. Here's an example. This probably you know this person has seen before from the January 6th Capitol riots. This guy claims that what they did on January 6th, they were actually affecting the quantum realm. This guy is like a quantum shaman or something like this. So there's this whole mix, and clearly bleeds out to politics. It bleeds out to other aspects, right? The idea of bending science in general for whatever purpose that you have can be very dangerous. So I feel like there's a big omission for quantum physicists and quantum scientists when it comes to talking about quantum physics in a way that is responsible. And the same goes for quantum technologies and quantum computing in particular. I just want to also show about the difference in now show the differences, right, between global north and global south. Here, I don't know if you saw this before, but you have this tool called Google Trends, where you can search for different topics and see their popularity in terms of what people are searching, how frequently are people searching about those topics. You can look at search terms in particular, but topics means that they are covering different languages or slightly different variations of a query, right? So in blue here, you have quantum healing, which is the topic, the query that I look to for the quantum mysticism, quantum spirituality type thing, and comparing to quantum computing. As you can see, there is a gap that got increasingly higher after 2023 in terms of interest. Of course, it depends on how how many news, different exciting things are going on with quantum computers, right? And we can compare, for instance, with Brazil, how this gap's not that, it's not the same, clearly. You have much more of an interplay between quantum computing and quantum healing interests. And then the gap opens a bit later on, after 2023. But here was the situation a little bit before 2023. So what happened in 2023 in Brazil? We started finally to get actual government like major investments in quantum technologies, right? So this is before 2023, and you can see that quantum computing, quantum healing, they were competing for attention much more than after the investments. You can clearly see the peak here. So yeah, my point here is that all this, the attention that something that is not quite quantum technologies, that is this distortion of quantum technologies or quantum mysticism, for instance, it has everything to do with the level of investment that we have for those technologies. The fact that we have now much more news covering actual quantum computing technologies, and people are excited about these topics. And you see content, and if you Google, you will not find only things about mysticism, right? That makes a huge kind of natural difference. So there's something to keep in mind also. And then again, of course, you can think how the obvious difficulty to do this if you don't have investment. If your country or if the business in your country are not interested in this, then you're more subject to this kind of lack of interest and the problems that come with the lack of interest, right? So just a few conclusions from this part. Science communication is overlooked in quantum tech, is overlooked for a few not always valid reasons. Translation can be an issue. Not translating self, but translation has a bunch of different difficulties that come with it. And the impacts go beyond quantum industry. There's also this ethical component of like the people falling for quantum therapy. This mixed with conspiracy theory, all those other things that are all playing together. If anyone wants to have questions as well, maybe it's a good time because I will change topics now.
There is one question from Anne. Anne, if you can read it yourself.
I'll need to stop sharing. If someone could read, it would be better.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think maybe this is putting a little too much weight on the physics use of the word quantum. You know, quantum was a word in the English language before its widespread use in physics, particularly in sci-fi, and it kind of meant the next level. There was a TV show back in the 80s called The Quantum Leap. It had nothing to do with really quantum physics. It was just more this next level kind of meaning. So I think this is blaming too much of pop culture misuse on physics use. I just don't quite see linking J6 stuff to quantum physics.
I mean, the quantum that they use is the same quantum, right? It comes from quantum physics. And the fact that we don't have enough science communication.
Excuse me. What comes from quantum? What comes from quantum physics? What are you saying was the same root or just the same word?
It is the same idea. For instance, in the Ant-Man situation, they use quantum when they intend to talk about quantum physics. They always borrow from quantum physics.
I don't think the
physics and just say quantum science is still the same.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. I think that's a reach, but thank you for the thought.
I mean, We can disagree. It's just that I don't think I'm saying quantum physics in a strictly physics way. My point is scientists, they are omitting themselves too much for something that is clearly having an impact. And you can say, well, it's not my job. Then there's pop science, there's pop culture. But it kind of is. If you're the only person that's keeping this knowledge and you don't do anything about it, when you see this getting distorted over and over again, I feel like it's kind of our fault. That's my point.
There is also a question from Marco. Sorry, Anne, if we can. Marco, please.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Shinohara. I think that some of the hype also has to do with funding, right? Because people want to secure funding by even saying that a computer is possible. So, maybe to transition you into the next topic, what's your evidence for there ever being a computer? For me, it's the uneven bond lengths of the divalent 4 mercury atom cluster when combined with 1 picometer lengthening of the mercury 1 fluoride versus fluoride.
I'm not sure if I understood the end of what you said, but in terms of the fact that people really are kind of relying on hype because they want investment on quantum computer, I agree completely. And one of the things that I think I don't mention here is the fact that that's one of the reasons people ignore the exaggerations, right? And there's an interesting set of arguments, I think, is in a document from the World Economic Forum called Quantum Governance Principles, I believe. They're mentioning, well, there's this need for hype, but also hype can lead to a lot of difficult things. For instance, they use the example of people getting scared or panicking about 5G towers and attacking 5G towers. That comes from a place of, then again, conspiracy and not understanding the technology that can create fears, right? So this is a topic that they said if you let the knowledge and the idea of what is quantum technologies run free, this is something that can happen. And I'm seeing the shift. But just working with science outreach, I see the shift in worry from something very optimistic to people now getting a bit worried because they don't really understand technology. And also the fact that it can backfire for companies as well, because if you promise too much and you start to not deliver, chances are that the investment will stop coming, right? And then it's likely that we're gonna have a winter, quantum winter, the same way that we have 2 or 3 AI winters, right? So
Sorry, my question's more specific than that. What's your best evidence that a computer will someday exist?
if a quantum computer will exist, you mean?
Yeah, like what's some physical evidence that you think would demonstrate that someday it'll happen?
Well, we do have prototypes for several different platforms.
Okay, yeah. Do you have a favorite physical example?
Well, we have superconducting computers, we have neutron atoms, we have ion traps. They follow the ideas that people understand of what a quantum computer should do. And yeah, they are used for some benchmarking. That's
Maybe better say that there are just kind of quantum processors, because maybe if you think about computer, you think about your laptop, but it is not the same. But yes, physically we have some quantum processors which acts as with qubits, with quantum gates, and etc.
yeah, I'm thinking in terms of something like the Vincenzo criteria, or some people will consider something like a D-wave computer as a quantum computer. There's some different conceptions for that, but people generally agree that a few of the platforms like IBM, Google, they have a quantum computer. If this is scalable, if you're gonna be better than actual computation, this is a bit more tricky, but you do have experimental evidence and attempts to characterize this, and also a bunch of theoretical attempts to prove the superiority of those algorithms. So that there is some how to say, there is a reason for you to invest in quantum technologies for sure. If that was the point.
Yeah, it was. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'll continue, and also I think some of the points will be more clear if I continue from here. So about the quantum divide, probably seen variations of this graph before. This is the 2024 version of it. And it's very clear that if you take a while and look at the different numbers that you have here, you have $15 billion for a few countries, $0 for others. The scales of investments, they vary a lot. And many countries are simply apparently not investing at all in quantum computers, which I believe you all may know. There is all the security threat in terms of what a quantum computer can do for cryptography, what other quantum technologies could do for security and privacy. So this is something to be aware of. And for instance, harvests now the cryptolator, which is the idea that you can just store some information that is encrypted and wait, for instance, for Shor's algorithm or for you to have access to a quantum computer that could decrypt that information. And chances are that this information will still be relevant depending on their lifetime, right? And then some of the arguments to not care about this too much is that there's plenty of time until we get a Shor algorithm working physically for the capacity that we need to break the encryption, the level that we have now. And also, we just need to migrate to quantum resistance cryptographies. And there is a few, realistically, there are some difficulties. For instance, here, a report from NIST, the idea is that the US wants to migrate everything until 2035. Some people specializing in cryptography think this is a very short time window, and there's a lot of difficulties to make this transition. If you're familiar with the security part, you probably know that the NIST standards spend many years trying to come up with standards for secure cryptography, and that came in several rounds. A few of the proposed cryptographies even they were able to break relatively easy. So it's not a exact science. It's difficult to create a new cryptographic scheme that's going to be both safe from what we have now, like classical security and quantum, the quantum threats that we have. And if the US takes 10 years, you can imagine how the other countries will need to kind of try to reach for something similar to this, but that involves capital, that involves human resources, that involves many, many things, right? So just to get away from just the science of how long it will take for us to run Shor's algorithm, but also the practical aspects of making this transition, right? Here's some data on what we can talk about quantum sovereignty, right? From this report called Quantum Computing in the G77. So they are looking for the G77, which are countries in development. And in green are the countries that could be considered sovereign. So there are two groups. There are three groups. The first two would be the countries that have some level of investment, some human capital to do so. They're looking at policies. They have a national fund strategy. And the difference between the engagement of two groups is whether they can do everything. They have all the capacities there, or they have diplomatic access to people that have. So the countries that you could be considered sovereign, pretty much China, India, Singapore, and UAE. And the other countries, pretty much everybody else relies on cloud assets, doesn't have investments, like specialized investments, doesn't have maybe the capital, the human capital. There are many countries in this situation. And cloud access is complicated because it can be revoked at any time. It's very limited. And so this is something to be considered as well. Who really have access to these technologies in a sovereign way, right? And then again, another important thing, a quantum computer does not protect you from quantum attacks. For you to be protected to quantum threats, you need post-quantum cryptography, for instance. Quantum computer would at most help you to be a menace to other people, pretty much. So there's also this aspect. Should we just be investing out on having cloud assets, or maybe should we be protecting ourselves? Those are different, completely different things. And they both cost money. So there is also that. And just to connect those things, knowledge barriers and the issue of sovereignty, knowledge gap and the hype and the mystical ideas and all this lack of communication about quantum technology make it difficult to attract talent, have proper training in quantum and post-quantum, discuss about ethics, governance, policy, because if you don't have the industry, people will always say, well, we're talking too far ahead. We don't even have things in place for us to be discussing less important topics. And sometimes science communication is understood also as a less important topic. And then, of course, preparing for security. Those things intensify each other. The difficulty to reach proper knowledge or interest from the general public makes it difficult to have all these conversations and be prepared for those sorts of challenges. Now, are we discussing enough about the quantum divide? Here is a paper called 10 Principles in Responsible Quantum Innovation. And the authors establish 10 principles separating the categories safeguarding, engaging, and advanced for quantum technologies to try to follow for it to be responsible, right? So addressing security issues, addressing dual use risks, addressing the quantum race, which is this winner takes all dynamic, the idea that you need to be the first one with the technology. One of the topics is quantum gap, and then you have inclusion, IP, societal relevance, innovation, responsibility, and education dialogue. So there are all those different aspects, and quantum gap kind of related to quantum race is one of the ones that they are considered as a principle for responsible quantum technologies. And here is from the paper that I mentioned. Is someone asking something?
Sorry, George, do you have a question or not? Maybe just some noise. Just continue.
Okay. So this is from the paper that I mentioned. Sorry, it says preparation, but if you Google the name, you find on archive. We analyze a few national quantum strategies for a couple of countries. We're focusing, that was from a journal in Canada. So we focus on countries kind of similar to Canada through a few criteria that we had. And we can notice that there's a very, very relative low emphasis in looking at the quantum gap, which is very telling that this is not a topic being looked too much. Of course, there are some arguments to that. You can compare also with principle 3, which is the quantum race, how much they are putting emphasis in we need to be the first, so we need to be one of the first, right? So this is just a kind of a symptom of the fact that this topic is not being addressed too much. From that paper, also one of the arguments that it's not only the quantum divide, this division between North and South, is not only morally problematic, but also suboptimal in terms of innovation. Mostly the whole idea is that more minds better, right? Then we can look at the global challenges. And well, there's one more argument there. But to conclude here, quantum divide and poor science communication are correlated in the sense that if you have poor science communication, it's hard to articulate for create an industry that's healthy, that looks to be sovereign, that has people well prepared and really understand the issues. The solution should include global North and South, which is what I wanted to mention. Also in the 10 principles, they give 2 suggestions, which would be to have a permanent forum for transdisciplinary dialogue between majority world, which is the word that they use for quantum, like global South, and the global North. And yeah, to have shared R&D objectives for quantum standards in a way that makes sense for everybody and tries to be inclusive and actable. These are one of the takeaways from that paper. That's not our paper, that's a paper that comes before. And I also like to highlight, because sometimes we just talk about high level, what companies and countries should do, but what can we do? And I believe what we can do is to be extra careful with poor science communication. Do not let it slide. Understand that this plays out in many different ways. And also bring the idea, the topic of quantum divide, if possible, to the forefront, right? As you can see, this is not talked enough. There are many things that are more difficult than it looks, and that just goes beyond the science, right? And we should pay attention to that. So that's it. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. Now, if we have some question, just raise hand and please. Okay, Anne, you can start. You just clap hands, okay. Any questions, some remarks?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a hype problem out there. I guess the big question is, what can we do about it? I'm thinking in particular of outfits like D-Wave, which for many years was making all these amazing statements about their technology while refusing to publish any papers and refusing to tell anyone how their stuff actually works. They've changed that slightly recently, but that doesn't mean I like where they are today. And they're not the only one doing that. So what can we do about it?
This is always a bit complicated, but I have to say I've seen many interesting discussions coming from this kind of concern. Not only this company that is said, but other instances when there was a press release that people blew out of proportion, or there's something that was misleading. What happens when I see, especially in social media, especially on Twitter, sometimes on LinkedIn as well, is that there's generally a big conversation that goes around this kind of things. in terms of what is hyped and what is not. This is actually kind of how I got interested in these topics, is to get involved in sort of conversations, try to be civilized, of course, and there's always a conflict of, oh, should we be talking about different companies, right? But there are many interesting discussions coming from, well, what this company said is probably not accurate, and then someone else can like agree, disagree, and I think that kind of moves the conversation along. There's an informal way to do so, right? But then again, I think that it's also important to think of informal ways to do it. So,
Well, there comes a point when being polite makes you part of the problem. I also noticed that among respectable companies that are, doing actual scientific research, there's a tendency for their marketing or public relations department to hire people who don't know anything about quantum physics or quantum computing. And they're the ones who are constantly, we get a 10% improvement in the noise performance, and they start putting out all these press releases about how it's a major breakthrough. So there's another, I'm not going to name names on that because, but these are major companies. They're large enough to have a dedicated, corporate communications department. And, not to be too kind about it, but that nobody in the corporate communications department knows anything about quantum computers, and they're putting out the press releases. So what can we do about that?
I think first of all, in these cases, generally it comes from the larger companies when they actually have a press release and go straight to like tech news, right? And it can get very out of proportion. First of all, let's be real. They are only saying a few things because the technical people are letting them. Also, no one stopped them. And there are few companies that you can almost see a pattern that you stop saying, well, there was just a problem with the communication, the press release, and they're doing it again, right? I myself, for instance, what happened, and I'm not going to name names, but it happened also, a big tech got an announcement, and they're saying a bunch of things about their quantum computer, and it happened to be on my area of expertise on my PhD. So I made a video about it saying, well, they're saying a bunch of things that it's hard to prove, they don't give the numbers for that enough. What happened from that is that I got shared everywhere. I went to a big newspaper to talk about that. So I think that's one way to, in a sense, get power back, right? You're talking about science, but you're being vocal about it and you're trying to spread the word, then maybe you can get a platform to actually say, well, that's not how it goes, right? And then again, I don't think everybody should do science communication. I myself changed my posture in terms of science communication many, many times. But if you can try to get a open communication with maybe people that like to do science communication or scientists that like to be more vocal, that's one way to get this conversation going and growing organically. And I can see this having an effect, right? At least this anecdotal situation for me, that was a way to have a pushback from that particular case, but I've seen that happening many times when like a press release says something and then someone else that happened to have that particular knowledge push back, and that became a conversation. I think that's an interesting way and a healthy way to go about it.
And I noticed there's a question from Death. He said, how does the term conspirituality used in this talk different from consciousness research, Rosa Penrose research?
I don't know exactly who you're talking about. Maybe I just don't understand, but I'm sorry. What I'm familiar from the topic is the podcast and the book. So if there is a different concept, then I don't know how to say because I'm not familiar with the other concept.
Thank you. And I personally have a question. How can quantum help in AI?
How can quantum help in AI? So I do a bit of research in quantum machine learning. And it's quite hard right now because many of the problems that we have, especially the problems that people have in mind in terms of what AI can do now, people think LLMs or computer vision, all those tests, they involve maybe trillions of parameters. And this is something that we're not quite there to do with a quantum computer, right? There are some people looking at it, but it's just the same way that we're not quite there to do shores and other things, just because the sheer amount of and the error rates. It's just hard to do interesting results, even like from theoretical results that can point out that maybe we could have interesting speedups, either like a small polynomial speedup and a few tests like that could be cast in a variational way, and then you can do something similar to like a neural network. But also there's this algorithm called HHL, which is basically to invert matrices, and this is of course like very related to what we need to do in AI, in machine learning. So, and that one should have, at least in theory, very big speed up, exponential speed up. So if we manage to make that happen, that will be very interesting for AI for sure. But there are a few caveats. Again, just the size of quantum computers now, but also a few of the algorithms that they looking at and they seem to be more promising. They require this entity called quantum memory that we don't quite have working. We have like a theoretical idea of that, but for it to have the speed up that we intend to have, we still don't have an implementation of this quantum memory. So yeah, there are some promises, both from theory and from what people are studying of heuristical algorithms. But yeah, well, it's definitely an area that people are interested in. Probably most people that are looking at quantum computing and algorithms in general, many people shift their focus for quantum machine learning because there are definitely interesting things there.
I can just say that in this question is that Bruna, can you unmute? Oh, okay. I can say that maybe just from technical reason, quantum can help to get some new kinds of embeddings because we have more mystified spaces, Hilbert spaces for our embeddings of our data. Embeddings are used, for example, for text, for graph, not only for ordinary data tables. And of course, at present, we can say that we can produce more sophisticated functions from quantum circuits than just from neural networks. This is just kind of technical support of quantum for AI, but at present, as Bruna said, it is not that level that we want and not at that level that we suspect for AI. Bruna, you must unmute yourself because we don't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry, how long have I been muted?
Just your answer for my.
Oh, but I really didn't mute myself. So I wasn't sharing the screen. I think my computer kind of did something here. I'm sorry. I was hearing you too, but I think you guys hear my answer about AI, right?
Yeah, we hear it.
Okay. Yeah, I was just agreeing, and I was saying that I also work with something that is not quite neural networks. There's more than just quantum neural networks, and there's quite an interesting area. It's just that I think people have a view of AI looking for all those very computer memory intensive tests like LLMs, and then it gets harder. But there's a lot of interesting things going on with QML and in the future AI also.
Okay, do we have other questions? If not, Helena, I think that we can finish. Thank you again for a very interesting talk and be here with us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming. Goodbye.